What happens when a titan of entertainment, a man whose very name is synonymous with blockbuster action and unwavering intensity, decides he's had enough? What happens when the sharpest tongue in late-night television, a master of satire, who built an empire on deconstructing the powerful, finally picks a fight with someone who won't just take the punch, but is prepared to dismantle the entire ring? This isn't a story about a witty exchange or a heated debate. This is the story of how a single televised interview became a silent, brutal checkmate. It's the story of the night Tom Cruise, in the heart of his enemy's territory, didn't just defend himself against Jon Stewart. He orchestrated the quiet, shocking end of The Daily Show as the world knew it. The air in New York City on that crisp October afternoon had a bite to it, a prelude to the coming winter that mirrored the electric tension building inside the NE Studio 52 on West 52nd Street. This was the hallowed ground of The Daily Show, the secular church for a generation of liberal-minded Americans who tuned in nightly to have their frustrations validated and their political foes hilariously eviscerated. At the center of this universe was Jon Stewart, the high priest of political satire. In the mid-2010s, Stewart wasn't just a comedian. He was a cultural force, a man whose monologues could shape news cycles and whose takedowns were legendary. He was, by all accounts, untouchable. His desk was his throne, his studio his kingdom, and his sharp, cynical wit was his scepter. Tonight's guest was Tom Cruise, in town to promote his latest globe-trotting action epic, a film destined to gross nearly $1 billion. On the surface, it was a standard booking a megastar selling a blockbuster. But everyone in the building, from the production assistants to Stewart himself, knew this was different. This wasn't just about a movie. This was about Scientology. Inside his dressing room, Stewart was a portrait of controlled confidence. He paced the floor, a mug of coffee in hand, running through the angles with his head writer. For Stewart, Cruise was the ultimate target. He wasn't just a celebrity. He was the public face of an organization many viewed with deep suspicion and ridicule. Stewart's team had prepped for weeks, compiling a dossier of Cruise's most infamous interviews, controversial church doctrines, and quotes from high-profile defectors. The plan was simple: a classic Daily Show gambit: lull the guest with softball questions about the film, then pivot hard, use Cruise's own intensity against him, poke and prod at the edges of his faith, until the carefully constructed facade cracked, creating a viral moment of television gold. Stewart saw it playing out in his mind, the uncomfortable shifting, the defensive posture, the trademark laser-eyed stare that would look under his sharp questioning less like focus and more like fanaticism. He wasn't just aiming to mock, he was aiming to expose. In his mind, it was a public service cloaked in comedy. He held all the cards. He was on his home turf with a loyal audience ready to laugh at every punchline and a research team that had armed him for bear. He fundamentally underestimated his guest. He saw a movie star. He failed to see a master strategist. Miles away in a penthouse suite at the Mandarin Oriental overlooking Central Park, Tom Cruise was preparing in a different way. There were no writers, no frantic pacing. There was only quiet, methodical focus. Cruise was a man who had spent decades navigating the treacherous currents of global fame. He understood media better than most media executives. He knew that walking into The Daily Show was walking into an ambush. He had seen what Stewart did to politicians, to CEOs, to other celebrities who stumbled into his crosshairs. He knew the questions wouldn't be about his stunt work. They would be surgical strikes aimed at his core identity. And so he had prepared not a defense, but a counteroffensive. For weeks, his own team, not of writers, but of high-level corporate researchers and legal analysts, had been compiling their own dossier. Their subject wasn't Scientology. It was Jon Stewart, Comedy Central, and its parent company, Viacom. Cruise understood a fundamental truth that Stewart, in his insulated world of satirical righteousness, had forgotten. Everyone has a vulnerability. Every institution, no matter how beloved, has a glass jaw. Cruise arrived at the studio not as a lamb to the slaughter, but as a silent predator. his calm demeanor, a mask for the devastating information he held in reserve. As he stepped out of his black SUV and walked past the waiting paparazzi, he wasn't just an actor arriving for a talk show. He was a general arriving at a battlefield of his own choosing. The show began as expected. The lights blazed, the audience roared, and Stewart, oozing his signature mix of charm and condescension, welcomed Cruise to the stage. The first segment was a masterclass in disingenuous rapport. Stewart praised the new film. He marveled at Cruise's dedication to performing his own stunts, joking, "You jumped out of a plane at 25,000 feet. I have trouble getting out of a chair that's too comfortable. Are you even human?" Cruise smiled, played along, and shared a thrilling anecdote about a sequence gone wrong. He was charming, engaging, and gave the audience exactly what they expected from a movie star. The energy was light, the laughter easy. Stewart was expertly setting the trap, letting his prey get comfortable, letting the audience see the affable celebrity before he revealed the supposed zealot underneath. The commercial break ended, and the air in the studio subtly shifted. Stewart leaned forward, his friendly expression tightening almost imperceptibly. "Tom, I'm fascinated by the kind of intensity you bring to everything you do. The film's your career. It's an absolute 100% commitment. And I see that same level of commitment when you speak about your faith. It's an all-in philosophy." It was the pivot, the first gentle jab wrapped in the language of a compliment. Cruise's smile didn't waver. "I believe if something is worth doing, it's worth doing completely, Jon. I don't think anyone achieves anything great with half measures." Stewart pressed on his tone, still inquisitive, but the edge was now clear. "But some have characterized that intensity, specifically regarding Scientology, not as faith, but as something more controlling. They talk about a culture of secrecy, of intimidation. When you hear that as the most prominent face of that religion, how do you respond?" The audience was quieter now. The easy laughter had been replaced by a tense anticipation. This was the moment they had been waiting for. Cruise didn't lean back. He didn't bristle. He leaned forward, matching Stewart's posture, his gaze steady and unnervingly calm. "What you're referring to, Jon," he began, his voice even and measured, "are claims made by a handful of disgruntled former members, which are then amplified by media outlets that profit from controversy. My church has helped millions of people, myself included, with tools to improve their lives. We have drug rehabilitation programs that have saved thousands. Our literacy programs have helped people all over the world. But that, for some reason, isn't the story people are interested in telling." Stewart smirked. "Or maybe," he countered, "people are more interested in the story of an organization that demands absolute fealty and allegedly harasses and audits journalists and critics who dare to question it." He was ready to play a clip, a curated snippet of a former member's tearful testimony, but he never got the chance. It was here that Cruise made his first move, shifting the foundation of the entire confrontation. "It's interesting you use the word question, Jon," Cruise said, his eyes locking onto Stewart's, "because I have a question for you. Is the purpose of this segment to have an honest discussion and seek understanding? Or is its purpose to mock and ridicule something you haven't taken the time to truly investigate for the entertainment of your audience?" The question hung in the air, sharp and pointed. It wasn't a defense of his religion. It was a challenge to Stewart's entire journalistic premise. For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Stewart's face. The hunter had just been asked to justify the hunt. The atmosphere in the studio had now gone from tense to arctic. The audience, once a unified chorus of laughter for their host, was now a fractured sea of uncertain faces. They had come for a roast, but they were witnessing a surgical dissection, and the patient on the table was suddenly Jon Stewart himself. Stewart, a master of improvisation, found himself on the back foot. His planned attack, his list of gotcha questions and damning clips, suddenly felt clumsy and predictable. He tried to recover to regain control of the narrative. "I think it's the role of comedy, and some would say journalism," he retorted, his voice a little tighter now, "to question powerful organizations, to speak truth to power. We are holding a mirror up to you." Cruz's response was immediate and devastatingly precise. "Then let's hold the mirror up, Jon. Let's really do that." And with that, he reached down beside his chair and lifted a sleek black leather folio onto his lap. The sight of it was so unexpected, so out of place in the rhythm of a talk show interview, that a wave of murmurs rippled through the audience. Stewart stared at the object, his face a mask of confusion. "What's that?" he asked, the smirk now completely gone. "Homework," Cruz replied, his voice still unnervingly calm. He opened the folio, revealing neatly tabbed documents. "You see, I knew this interview wouldn't really be about my movie, so I took the liberty of doing some research too. I believe in being prepared. You mentioned speaking truth to power, a noble sentiment. So let's talk about the power behind you." He paused, letting the silence stretch his eyes, never leaving Stewart's. The camera zoomed in, one on Cruz's focused expression, one on Stewart's increasingly panicked face. The control room was in chaos. Producers were shouting into their headsets, but there was nothing they could do. This was live television, and it was careening off the rails. "Your show, The Daily Show," Cruz continued, his voice like a scalpel, "is owned by Comedy Central, which is a subsidiary of Viacom, a multi-billion-dollar global corporation, a real seat of power, and a significant portion of Viacom's advertising revenue. The money that funds this show, that pays your salary, comes from a handful of key sponsors." He lifted a single sheet of paper from the folio. "Let's take, for example, your top pharmaceutical sponsor. Let's call them Company A." He didn't use the real name, which was a masterful stroke of legal precision. "Right now, as we speak, Company A is facing a Justice Department investigation and a class action lawsuit in 3 states for allegedly marketing a powerful antipsychotic drug to children and concealing data about its harmful side effects. We're talking about real documented harm to vulnerable people. You attack my faith, which is based on spiritual principles, yet your entire platform is bankrolled by a corporation accused of chemically harming children for profit." A collective gasp went through the audience. Stewart was paralyzed, his mouth slightly agape. He looked like he had been physically struck. Cruz wasn't finished. He casually turned to another tabbed section. "Or we could talk about the multinational electronics conglomerate that is another of your primary sponsors. A company that has faced repeated credible accusations from international human rights groups for using child labor and maintaining unsafe working conditions in their overseas factories. You sit here on a multi-million-dollar set and mock my beliefs as dangerous, while the very lights above your head are paid for with profits derived from the exploitation of children." He placed the papers neatly back in the folio and closed it with a soft click. The sound echoed in the dead silent studio. Cruz leaned back in his chair, the picture of tranquility. He looked directly at Stewart, whose face was pale, his usual witty confidence completely shattered. "So my question, Jon," Cruz said, his voice dropping to an almost conversational yet chillingly final tone, "is this my beliefs and my church help people? The power that funds your truth-telling is verifiably accused of hurting them. Who should be answering the tough questions here tonight? Whose mirror is dirtier?" The seconds that followed were the longest in the history of late-night television. Jon Stewart, the man who always had the last word, the master of the witty comeback, had nothing. He was utterly and completely exposed, not by an attack on his comedy, but by a cold, factual dismantling of the moral high ground on which he had built his entire career. The interview was over. The show cut to a commercial, but the damage was done. In the ensuing break, Cruz simply stood up, nodded politely to a stunned Stewart, and walked off stage with the quiet, unassailable dignity of a man who had not just won a fight, but had rewritten the rules of engagement. The fallout was not loud and explosive, but swift and silent, like a corporate execution. The clip, of course, went viral. But the narrative wasn't Jon Stewart eviscerates Tom Cruise. It was Tom Cruise turns the tables on The Daily Show. Hashtags like hashtag Viacom sponsors and Jasasi Stewart's Glass House dominated social media. More importantly, investigative journalists smelling blood in the water began digging into Cruise's claims. Major news outlets from the Wall Street Journal to the New York Times started publishing deep dives, not into Scientology, but into the ethical paradoxes of Viacom's advertising partnerships. The sponsors Cruise had alluded to, now facing a PR nightmare of their own, began to quietly pull their multi-million-dollar ad buys from The Daily Show and other Viacom properties. They couldn't afford to be associated with the hypocrisy that Cruise had so brilliantly exposed. The scandal had shifted entirely. No one was talking about Tom Cruise's religion anymore. They were talking about Jon Stewart's integrity and the tainted money that fueled his righteous crusade. Within 3 months, the financial pressure on the show was immense. It was losing money, its reputation was tarnished, and its host was wounded. Stewart, once the confident giant slayer, now looked like a hypocrite to a significant portion of his audience. The wit was still there, but the moral authority was gone. Viacom, a corporation that cared about profit above all else, made a business decision. An internal memo was leaked, then officially confirmed The Daily Show with Jon Stewart would be going on an indefinite hiatus at the end of the season. Everyone knew what that meant. It was a cancellation shrouded in corporate jargon to save face. Jon Stewart, the king of satire, had been dethroned not by a politician or a rival network, but by a movie star he had fatally underestimated. Tom Cruise never spoke of the incident again. He didn't need to. He had proven a profound and brutal point: before you declare a holy war on someone else's beliefs, you must be absolutely certain that your own house is in order. The ultimate lesson wasn't about the dangers of a particular faith, but about the universal danger of sanctimony. It's a lesson that power isn't always about who shouts the loudest, but about who understands the complete battlefield, and that the most effective weapon against a self-proclaimed truth-teller is a colder, harder, and more inconvenient truth. So who was truly in the right in this epic confrontation? Was Tom Cruise's meticulously planned counterattack a brilliant and justified act of self-defense, or was it a cold, calculated corporate assassination that used facts as a weapon to silence a critic? Did Jon Stewart get what he deserved for his hubris, or was he a victim of a power play that no one could have seen coming? More importantly, where do we draw the line between satirical commentary and moral hypocrisy? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. This is a battle with layers of complexity, and we want to hear your take. If you found this story as compelling as we did, do us a favor and hit that like button. Share this video with anyone who appreciates a story of strategy and consequence, and most importantly, subscribe to our channel for more deep dives into the moments that shaped our culture. The most valuable lesson here is a timeless one: always be prepared. The battles you anticipate are rarely the ones that decide your fate. It's the ones you never see coming, the ones that attack your very foundation, that matter most. Know your opponent, but more importantly, know yourself and all the vulnerabilities you may have forgotten were there.